Hi everyone, welcome to my lecture on the subject Тілдік қарым-қатынас мәдениеті бойынша практикум. According to the approved syllabus, our today's theme is advertising. So let me introduce you with the plan of the lesson. What cross-cultural advertising means. We will learn language in advertising, communication styles in advertising, the role of colors, numbers, and images in advertising, and we'll learn cultural values in advertising. The second part of the plan is about cultural structures, politeness, coding, and the last topic that we will discuss in our today's lecture is practical tips for cross-cultural advertising. So let's get down to our lecture. What cross-cultural advertising means. Culture affects everything we do. This applies to all areas of human life, from personal relationships to conducting business abroad. When interacting within our native cultures, culture acts as a framework of understanding. However, when interacting with different cultures, this framework no longer applies due to cross-cultural differences. Cross-cultural awareness aims to help minimize the negative impact of cross-cultural differences through building common frameworks for people from different cultures to interact within. In business, cross-cultural solutions are applied in areas such as team building, foreign trade, negotiations, and website design. Cross-cultural solutions are also critical to the effective cross-cultural advertising. Services and products are usually designed and marketed at a domestic audience. When a product is then marketed at an international audience, the same domestic advertising campaign abroad will in most cases be ineffective. Cross-cultural research on advertising is a relatively new field which reflects the development and trends of the last decades in economic and commercial activities. In recent years, there has been an evident tendency to economic integration, especially for the countries who have reached a certain level of wealth. One of the main issues in international marketing and advertising is whether consumers from different countries will become more and more alike, or whether the differences will remain stable or even will grow more. The question of the management process of marketing communications is reflected at a decisional level by the dilemma of standardization or globalization of marketing and advertising strategies. Advertising strategies were targeted at contrary of the cultural adaptation to the paradigms and patterns revealed by every single country or region. Management process for marketing communication studies have been extremely useful in order to test the convergence of models and tastes in media and advertising consume, underlining common aspects and issues, differences, and maybe potential universalia. According to the theory of convergence, divergence of consuming habits, it is possible to identify a pattern of evolution parallel to economic growth. Initially, countries converge with increased wealth, but in the developed world, at a certain level of wealth, convergence reaches a ceiling after which there is no further convergence and differences remain stable or increase. And such differences, of course, are determined primarily by the cultural factors. Of course, by following management process for marketing communications, global campaigns would be successful only in a context of cultural and behavioral convergence between the countries where they are delivered. Cross-cultural advertising simply consists in advertising a service or product in order to reach many different cultures simultaneously. Cross-cultural advertising simply consists in advertising a service or product in order to reach many different cultures simultaneously. Sometimes it may be confused with other types of advertising. For example, cross-cultural advertising is different from multicultural advertising. In fact, the latter consists in certain advertisements with the clear purpose of targeting only a particular ethnic segment. For example, people belong to a specific country, a specific geographic area, and so on. This advertising style is quite common in the United States, where the most represented targets are usually African American, Hispanic, and Asian ethnic groups. But cross-cultural advertising, or we can call it as a global marketing, may be considered the opposite. This type of advertising is aimed to send a message that everyone can understand and appreciate. This objective is very complex and it sometimes may be very risky too. The advertising world is full of examples of firms, even very well-known firms, which have made terrible gaffes through advertisements without being informed before about the target culture. It is obvious that an advertisement which has performed very well in one country may not have the same success in a different country. It can sometimes be a real disaster, triggering the risk of damaging the image of the firm. The danger may concern many aspects. Often it can originate from using improper language. And sometimes it can be just caused by the use of a certain specific number or color. In fact, it is necessary to make some small changes to the original version of the ad in order to adapt it to a certain target and to avoid unpleasant result. Advertising, because it is strongly culture bound, depend on cultural factors such as languages, values, lifestyle, communication style, and media habits. And it is a component of the marketing mix most difficult to standardize. International companies believe in the convergence of consuming habits and prefer global strategies as the success of some brands, as Coca-Cola, Levi's, or L'Oreal may prove. The essence of successful advertising is convincing people that the product is meant for them. By purchasing it, they will receive some benefit, whether it be lifestyle, status, convenience, or financial. However, when advertising campaign is taken abroad, different values and perceptions as to what enhances status or gives convenience exist. These differences make the original advertising campaign defunct. And now I'm gonna demonstrate you a video in which very famous firms are trying to sell their products and advertising their products in intercultural environment, and in that process they have had some gaffes. Please watch and enjoy the video. Try to notice the mistakes that international companies have made.
There was this one time when Pepsi goofed it up on both German and Chinese markets. Their main slogan, "Come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation," was very badly misinterpreted. The German version was quite funny and very reassuring. It urged people to rise from the grave together with Pepsi. Germans laughed at it and didn't seem to mind. But in case of Chinese consumers, it was more like scary than funny. It went like, "Pepsi will get your parents from the grave." American Airlines wanted more customers so badly, they decided to change their regular seats to leather ones. However, in Mexico, their campaign failed because of their silly slogan, "Fly in leather." In Spanish, fly in leather sounds like vuela en cuero and means fly naked. Hey, why the hell not? Gerber decided they should supply Central Africa with their baby food products. Their corporate identity is the smiling baby face they feature on all their products. The popular majority of Central Africa can't read, and that's why they always put condoms on the cover of the product. So, Gerber markers failed to take into account that a child's face would seem weird, better yet, creepy. I can only imagine people's faces when they were offered that cannibal baby food. Chevrolet Nova. Looks good, isn't it? Unfortunately, this beauty wasn't in demand in Spanish-speaking countries. And if Google is right, that's 23 countries. All because of its name. The thing is, in Spanish, Nova means not going. Get it? Not going. Who the hell would want to buy a car with a name like that? I wouldn't. In 2009, Russian leading gas company Gazprom merged with Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, so they gave their joint venture a rather controversial name, Niggas. Niggas, as you already guessed, was the abbreviation of Nigeria and Gazprom. Quite a few people were shocked and outraged from what seemed to be more suitable for a Snoop Dogg's music video. As for me, I say let niggas be niggas. After a launching campaign in Asia, Coca-Cola noticed that their slogan sounds a bit weird in a few Chinese dialects. They came up with things like bite the tadpole and wax horse. After a while, they changed their slogan to something like happiness in your mouth. And it goes like this.
可口可乐
In the 1980s, some really weird diet candies appeared. Those were called AIDS. 1 year later, a first case of AIDS was detected. And although it spells a bit differently, it is pronounced the same. AIDS will help you lose weight, which is true in a way. Oh God.
Okay, let's have a brief conversation about the role of language in cross-cultural advertising. So, it may seem somewhat obvious to state that language is key to effective cross-cultural advertising. However, the fact that companies persistently fail to check linguistic implications of company or product names and slogans demonstrates that such issues are not being properly addressed. The advertising world is littered with examples of linguistic cross-cultural blunders. Language must also be analyzed for its cultural suitability. Okay, let's continue discussing the communication style in advertising. Understanding the way in which other cultures communicate allows the advertising campaign to speak to the potential customer in a way they understand and appreciate. For example, communication styles can be explicit or implicit. Explicit meaning is not clearly stated, one has to imply meaning, and explicit clearly stated, no doubt about meaning. An explicit communicator, example in United States of America, assumes the listener is unaware of background information or related issues to the topic of discussion and therefore provides it themselves. While implicit communicators, for example, like communicators in Japan, assume the listener is well informed on the subject and minimizes information relayed on the premise that the listener will understand from implication. An explicit communicator would find an implicit communication style vague, whereas an implicit communicator would find an explicit communication style exaggerated. Okay, let's continue our lecture with the role of colors in advertising. So, colors as marketing tools is the simplest and most taken for granted aspects of advertising, and they need to be inspected under cross-cultural microscope because color do not all translate well across cultures. As color is universal until, of course, it is suddenly not. Negotiating colors surprisingly divergent meanings across cultures can juice up an international design project's expressive force, or it can spawn flat-footed blunders. To make the materials according to the role of color in cross-cultural advertising, I would like to demonstrate a video that gives you much more information with an examples.
By defining what is marketing color psychology. So color psychology is an area of research that looks at how colors influence our behavior. And when we use it in marketing, for example, different colors can impact our audience perception of a brand that aren't always apparent. So just because something is your favorite color doesn't mean that it always fits your brand or your message. Because with every color, there's gonna be some positives and some negatives, and you need to be aware of both of them. And you should also know that colors are just a portion of your brand's experience. There's a lot of other factors that come into play, like your fonts, your design styles, your themes, your products, and even your people. Now it'll take me hours to explain everything, so in this video we're just gonna go over marketing color psychology and the things that you really need to know. Now let's go ahead and look at 7 colors to understand the psychological effect that it can have on people. Starting with color number 1, blue. Now I love this color because the color blue has some really strong effects on your mind. And some of the positive associations with the color blue is that it can have a very calming effect. Just think about staring out at a nice blue ocean, seeing the calming waves, and enjoying the peace of everything. Hey Sean, wake up. Okay, now blue is also associated with wisdom, strength, and trust. However, there are some negative associations with blue, especially when you use the color dark blue, which can be associated with coldness and a lack of emotion. So brands who want to win you over with trust often use blue. Of course, a lot of the credit card companies like American Express, Visa, and even PayPal. You'll also see some social media brands using the color blue like Twitter, Facebook, and if you're old like me, MySpace, to convey that their platforms are a trustworthy place where you can engage with your friends. Okay, let's move on to one of my personal favorite colors, number 2 on my list, the color red. Now, red is a powerful color that has some great positive effects. For one, it can spark strong emotions, both negative and positive. And for 2, red is associated with power and passion, which can increase levels of urgency and excitement, which is why you'll often see red associated with fast cars and lingerie. No need to fear, Super Sean is here. On the other hand, very dark tones of red can give off negative levels of energy like anger or danger. Netflix is a company that uses the color red to display a level of excitement and passion that you may experience while using their app. All right, let's move on to color 3 on my list, the color yellow. Now, obviously yellow is a very strong and bright color, but when used appropriately can have a profound effect. So the positives of yellow is that it's associated with sunshine, happiness, and fun. So if your brand experience incorporates some of that, then using a splash of yellow can definitely help. On the other hand, there are some negative associations with the color yellow, which the number 1 being cheapness. So when people see the color yellow, they normally expect to see some good deals. Think about when you're out shopping and you see a for sale sign. You normally see the color yellow associated with it. Also, dark tones of yellows can often portray emotions of fear and anxiety. One of the most notable brands that uses the color yellow is McDonald's, and of course their brand is associated with cheapness, happiness, and fun. So they're doing a really great job of harnessing the power of the color yellow. All right, let's move on to color number 4 on my list, and that is the color orange. One of the biggest positive effects of the color orange is that it's often associated with the sun in the fall, which gives off a feeling of warmth. And it's the color that people most consider to be cheap. So when you think about really high-end, expensive items, you normally don't think about the color orange. On the flip side, a really dark tone of orange can be associated with frustration and immaturity. Now, can you think of one of the biggest companies in the world that uses the positive effects of orange? If you said Amazon, then you're right. Think about it. Amazon is associated with really good customer service, which is the warmth and the friendliness positives of the color orange. And they're also known for having some really good deals, which they're taking advantage of, the color orange being cheap. Moving on to color number 5 on my list, the color green. Now, green is a relaxing color that's easy on the eyes, and some of the positive associations with green is that they're synonymous with health, freshness, nature, and growth. So if you're in the business of helping people grow their money like finance, accounting, or banking, then green may be a good choice for you. Now, there's not a lot of negative connotations associated with the color green, except for the fact that it can be a boring color. All right, it's not very fun or exciting, especially if you're using a dark tone of green.
Hey Sean, don't forget to eat all your vegetables.
Now, one of my personal favorite brands that leverages the power and the positives of the color green is Whole Foods. They focus on really healthy, natural foods, which correlates really well with the color green. All right, let's move on to color number 6 on my list, which is, this is a good one, the color black. Now, black is a very powerful color that is often associated with luxury, sophistication, and substance. You know, you think of like a black tie event or like a premium ride on Uber. Black has a very exclusive feeling associated with it. However, it's one of the hardest colors to execute properly because you normally need other psychological influences as well. And when you fail at using it properly, then the negatives can be really bad. It can be associated with coldness, evil, oppression, or even death. All right, now the last color on my list is the color white. Now, just like black, white can be an extremely powerful color, but it's also difficult to execute. Now, some of the positive associations with white is that it's often referred to being modern, sleek, and squeaky clean. So brands like Apple and Tesla take advantage of white because of their ability to demonstrate these things with their entire brand experience. However, if white is executed poorly, then white can look very lazy, plain, and lack personality. All right, so that's it.
Okay, let's talk about cultural values in advertising. When advertising abroad, the cultural values underpinning the society must be analyzed carefully. Is there a religion that is practiced by the majority of the people? Is a society collectivist or individualist? Is it family orientated? Is it hierarchical? Is there a dominant political or economic ideology? All of these will impact an advertising campaign if left unexamined. For example, advertising that focuses on individual success, independence, and stressing the word I would be received negatively in countries where teamwork is considered a positive quality. Rebelliousness or lack of respect for authority should always be avoided in family-oriented or hierarchical societies. By way of conclusion, we can see that the principles of advertising run through to cross-cultural advertising too. That is now your market, what is attractive to them and what their aspirations are. Cross-cultural advertising is simply about using common sense and analyzing how the different elements of an advertising campaign are impacted by culture and modifying them to best speak to the target audience. Also, we should notice that in cultural values, it should be taken into cultural context, historical context, economic context, social context, and psychosocial context. When you are doing some advertisement in social marketing, content such kind of methods of interpreting your products. Okay, let's get down to cultural structures. Cultural structures are a grounding point for much work in intercultural communication. Specifically, Asian cultures such as Japan have been described along three dimensions as a collectivistic in value orientation, B. high context in communication style, and C. vertical in social structure. While Western cultures such as United States have been described in opposite terms as A. Individualistic, B. Low context, and C. Horizontal. Cultural structures are grounding point for much work in intercultural communication, like collectivistic versus individualistic, in value of culture, and high context versus low context, in communication style, vertical versus horizontal, in social style structure. So furthermore, I'll give you much more information about collectivistic and individualistic culture of society, and high context, low context of communication style, and vertical versus horizontal social structure. So
the main difference between individualistic and collectivist cultures concerns responsibility. In individualistic cultures, people are responsible for themselves. People are free to pursue their own lives with as little interference as possible from outside. Individual rights and equality in the law, along with privacy, are essential features of these kinds of cultures. Every single individual is sovereign to themselves, and they are only obstructed when they interfere with the sovereignty of others. In collective cultures, the well-being of the group is given priority over the individuals that belong to them. In collective cultures, the group is responsible for the actions of the individual, as well as their safety and welfare. The context of a situation depends on who you are communicating with, where you are, what you are communicating about, and why you are communicating in the first place. In low context cultures, the way people communicate doesn't vary so much. It tends to be more formal, and people focus on the subject matter rather than the person they are communicating with. In a business setting, problems and differences are often dealt with early on. Once an agreement has been reached, the details are often recorded and written down. In low context cultures, detailed contracts are an essential part of doing business. Once a contract is signed, it can rarely be changed, and it is used to settle any disagreements that might arise in the future. In high context cultures, the focus is on the people involved. Relationships are a key part of communication. When doing business, people remain flexible and change can happen at any time. Problems are often put to one side and only dealt with when absolutely necessary.
Okay, the next stage is about vertical specialization. This is a management style in which one manager has authority over another. Vertical specialization refers to the extent to which responsibilities at different levels are defined and reflects the field of decision-making process. In most cases, such kind of authority is given to the director of the company or to the rector of the universities or to the president of the governments. Horizontal specialization is a management style in which several persons with equal authority are given oversight over specific departments or tasks. Such kind of organization system of or structure of society is you can observe in a stakeholding companies in which no manager has a authority on each another. In a vertical organization, business has a pyramidal top-down structure with CEO, president or owner at the top, a middle section of managers and supervisors, and a bottom section of regular employees. In such kind of structure, the command comes from the top of the pyramid to the down. The managers who is in the middle of this pyramid takes a command from the directors or from the stakeholders of the company and gives this task to the employees. So the command is made by the decision of the stakeholders. In a horizontal organization, business has a flat structure, which means there are very few managers and more authority is granted to rank and file employees. Rather than having to satisfy managers, employers are aimed on the goal of the company, which can develop the efficiency and morality of the company. Let's talk about main difference between vertical and horizontal business organizations. In a vertical system, upper level management issues orders and employees follow those orders without input or objection. Vice versa, employees in a horizontal organization are encouraged to make suggestions and offer ideas that can improve workplace processes and are given the authority to implement changes without having to obtain authorization.